Standing by for us, SABC News reporter Samkele Maseko. A very good afternoon to you, Samkele. Just talk us through what happened earlier on and how it was linked to those investment conferences that the president has been holding.
Essentially, Nzinga, Sandvik did pledge 350 million rands into the South African investment conference called by Cyril Ramaphosa to lure those much-needed investments into the country in order to alleviate poverty, inequality and underdevelopment, and also to grow the South African economy, which in the second quarter GDP numbers by Stats SA saw a contraction of about 0.7% of the South African economy. The president saying that mechanization can help in alleviating unemployment within the country and to create jobs, as opposed to the contrary view by many unions that mechanization is going to lead to a jobs bloodbath, particularly within the mining sector. President Ramaphosa says research, in other hand, shows that mechanization will help in creating much needed jobs, and also called upon Sandvik to have a working relationship with TVET colleges within the country in order for them to be able to get artisans, able to ensure that they are able to come and work at plants and factories such as Sandvik in future, so that there is an alignment between what we are seeing that is being taught within the TVET colleges and what the industry needs. But mainly speaking about the economy of the country, speaking about how they need those much investments, and the investment conferences that he has held throughout the course of the years, tracking those investments from the various companies. Just next week is going to be going to KwaZulu-Natal, in KwaDukuza, going to SAPI, and also one of the companies that has also pledged those millions of rands into the South African economy through those investment conferences of the president.
Samkele, just give us some more insight into what happened today and what you were seeing at that announcement.
In essence, what we saw Sandvik speaking about this particular plant that they have here. We saw the president going through the workshop, seeing how 60% of the instruments and the machines that are here at Sandvik, they are essentially made and essentially installed here in South Africa. Then you've got a different part of the plant, which is essentially the assembling part of that specific plant, which they import some of those machines. They come in their various parts and then they are constructed in South Africa and put together to make it into a full machine. But the one part of it, 60% of this particular factory, is total beneficiation of its entire value chain into South Africa.
Samkele, was there any address by the president to the media or any interaction? Because on my left, I'm seeing visuals of opposition parties at the Public Protector's Office calling for speeding up of the investigation into the Phala Phala farm robbery. I'm wondering if any of that crossed over into the event today.
What we're going to do, Nzinga, I'm just going to ask my colleague Kwazi Manzi to just go and quickly call Mr. Vincent Magwenya, the spokesperson of the president, who was alongside the president. In fact, the president, who was scheduled to have a doorstop with him, but it was later on told that that doorstop will not take fruition. We were set up inside for him to address us on certain pertinent matters, but the president then quickly could not speak to us. But I am going to try and bring in the president's spokesperson, Mr. Vincent Magwenya, as you are seeing those visuals, particularly pertaining to the president on the issues of Phala Phala. Those issues are being ventilated at the Public Protector's Office by opposition parties. Just going to quickly bring in Mr. Vincent Magwenya to come onto my right-hand side. Mr. Magwenya, just the essence of the president's visit here. It comes at a time where he's been granted an extension by the South African Reserve Bank to answer questions, particularly pertaining to Phala Phala and those dollars. We've also seen opposition parties marching to the Public Protector's Office. How's the president feeling at this point in time? And when will he be responding to the Reserve Bank?
No, Samkele, the essence of the visit here comes at a time when jobs figures are up. Comes at a time when some of the pledges that were made at the Presidential Investment Conference are bearing fruit, as you saw. So that's the essence of the visit here. However, the rest of your question, the response will be as follows. There is ongoing engagement with the Reserve Bank in compliance and in full cooperation with their investigation. There was some confusion which was unnecessary yesterday, because yesterday was not the deadline. The deadline is the 22nd of September, and that deadline follows a further request for information coming from the Reserve Bank after the responses were submitted to the initial round of questions. So there is no issue there. There is full cooperation, full support of the investigation. And the President, as you said, remains consistent about observing due process and about, subjecting himself to these processes.
We saw reports that there was a Sudanese businessman in 2019 on Christmas Day who dropped off the dollars, the 480 million rands dollars at the president's farm in Phala Phala. Is there any credence to those reports? And do these monies come from an Asian business person who was buying buffaloes from the president, or they come from the Sudanese businessman?
Now, Samkele, I will avoid being dragged into matters that are currently being investigated. Suffice to say, as we initially communicated back in June, that the funds flowed from an acquisition of animals from the farm. That remains the position. All other details will be ventilated during the course of the investigations.
The president said jokingly inside, whilst opening with the lady who was the MC, who's a lawyer by profession, that he needs a lot of legal advice these days. How's that legal advice coming along?
Samkele, as you'll know, as an astute journalist that you are, that by virtue of occupying that seat as the president or head of state in the country, there's a lot of litigation. Other than matters that relate to the president directly, personally, the presidency is always cited in a number of litigations, mostly concerning government work or government decisions, etc. So it was in that context, and obviously, as you gathered, it was also mentioned in terms of these processes that are currently underway. But he's fully supported legally. He's got a very good legal team that's advising him and that's guiding him and providing support to him throughout these processes.
On the issues pertaining to these investment drives, 350 million rands by Sandvik invested into the economy, 500 jobs created here. Are you finally tracking all of those pledges that were made in the subsequent investment conferences of the president? And where is your next stop to tracking those investments that have been pledged by these businesses?
We have been tracking those investments through the DTI, through the project management office in the presidency. So that tracking is ongoing. As you know, some of these pledges cut across a number of sectors: energy, manufacturing, and other key sectors. We will be visiting more projects. Next week, the president will be in KZN visiting two projects. One is an expansion project. Another one is a greenfields investment. We'll provide those details either later today or tomorrow in terms of that visit. So you will see the president making stops such as this more regularly as these investments begin to bear fruit, but also as our economy gets out of the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Queen Elizabeth is no more. You are going to the United Nations General Assembly this week. You're probably leaving sometime. Next week, you've also know that the president will also be going to meet with the president of the United States, Joe Biden. Will any of the visits to the United States of America be hampered now by the death of Queen Elizabeth?
Obviously, the passing away of Her Majesty is a global event, and it's going to impact some of the already planned global events. Global leaders will be attending to various related events that will commemorate the life of Her Majesty. At this stage, it's still early for us to say exactly how our program is going to be impacted, except to say, as things stand, the President is still scheduled to travel to Washington for a meeting with President Biden. Following that engagement, he will then travel to New York for engagements around the United Nations General Assembly, but also for his address at the United Nations General Assembly. So as things stand, that program remains. We will assess as changes are communicated to us in terms of the program in the U.S. or in terms of other elements relating to bidding farewell to Her Majesty.
Will South Africa be getting, are you anticipating to be getting an invite to bid farewell to Her Majesty?
Ooh, as I said, it's a global event, so I can't really preempt decision making on the side of those in charge in the UK. We will respond accordingly as and when communication arrives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent Magwenya, the spokesperson of President Cyril Ramaphosa, speaking about the president's planned trip to Washington in the United States of America next week to meet President Joe Biden of the United States of America, and subsequent to that will be traveling to New York to the United Nations General Assembly.
Samkele Maseko, SABC News political reporter, trying to get some answers there. Thanks so much for your time and your crossing.